Okay, we'll start with this. Former IBF Super Featherweight champion Tevin Farmer says, Emmanuel Navarrete is easy work. He is too slow. Tevin Farmer, who took a long hiatus from the sport after losing his title to Jojo Diaz in 2020.
He sat out for the subsequent 2 years that followed.
Now, to a large extent, the now 3-division champion, Emmanuel Navarrete, is viewed as the best fighter at 130 pounds. Farmer, a former champion in his own right, would love to share the ring with him. As for how their clash would play out, Farmer believes that despite Navarrete throwing punches from all angles, he'll see them coming from a mile away. He's too slow, Farmer told BoxingScene.com recently. Following a 3.5-year hiatus, Farmer shook off the cobwebs with back-to-back wins. They weren't against world beaters, first against Avery Sparrow, and the next versus Oscar Barajas, but Farmer was happy with his performances.
Yeah, Tevin wasn't out for 3 years, he was out for 2. After losing his belt to Jojo Diaz in 2020, he sat out all of 2021, all of 2022, but he came back this year, and he's already fought 2 times this year. He's going for 3.
Against an opponent that has yet to be announced, and, as stated, he seems to like his chances against Emmanuel Navarrete. No longer is the Philly native one of the younger fighters around. Bearing that in mind, Farmer wants to jump in the fast lane. Although Navarrete will give Farmer another up-close look at his skills this week when he takes on Robson Conceicao, Farmer believes he's seen enough. And if given the chance to swap fists with him, the now 33-year-old is convinced that he'll dominate the current champion. I don't want to say easy, because boxing is boxing and anything can happen, but if we're speaking from a perfect world, yeah, it would be easy.
Tevin Farmer's comeback fight after that 2-year hiatus was fought just north of lightweight, just a pound or so over.
By all rights, it was a super lightweight contest. His very next fight, the fight after that was fought within the lightweight limit, but a few pounds less than his previous fight, and it looks a lot like what Tevin is doing is making his way south, back to super featherweight. The problem with that is, if he's making his way south to super featherweight, looking for an Emmanuel Navarrete fight, what he might find is that Emmanuel's not going to be there very long. I don't think Emmanuel, beyond this week's fight with Robson Conceicao this Thursday, I don't think he's going to stay at 130 pounds.
Let's talk about that fight.
3-division WBO super featherweight champion of Mexico, Emmanuel Navarrete, will be facing Brazil's own Olympic gold medalist this Thursday on the undercard of Stevenson versus De Los Santos. And this will be Emmanuel's 3rd fight, only his 3rd fight in the super featherweight division, his 3rd fight in the last 12 months. Emmanuel has been busy, and he's got the right style for the job, Emmanuel. He's a pressure fighter, we all know that, whereas Robson, he's a pure boxer. The caveat is that Robson has a lot more time in at this weight than Emmanuel does. So even if Emmanuel has the right base style for the job, Robson is more acclimated to this weight than Emmanuel is. That creates interesting opportunities, interesting possibilities. We saw what a bit of well-placed counterpunching was able to do to Emmanuel with Liam Wilson in what was his very first fight at this weight. It's the most human I've ever seen Emmanuel.
The most vulnerable. In spite of that, he was still able to grind Liam Wilson down and get him out of there. He looked sensational in his last fight with Oscar Valdez. Oscar Valdez, who many people feel actually lost to Robson Conceicao, who Emmanuel is about to fight.
Emmanuel looked human with Liam Wilson in his first fight at this weight, but he looked sensational with Oscar in his very last fight. The question is, how's he going to look with Robson? How is he going to look with Robson Conceicao this Thursday? Conservatively, I do favor Emmanuel to win the fight because he's got the right base style for the job.
But he is still relatively new to this weight.
Robson has only ever lost to quality operators, quality fighters, a controversial loss to Oscar Valdez that some people feel Robson, he should have got the decision, he should have won, and a more decisive loss to Shakur Stevenson.
He's got 2 losses, but he's never been stopped.
Last in action in June of this year opposite the ring, Nicolas Polanco, who he fought to a no contest, a no decision. If Emmanuel Navarrete can be the first to stop him, can be the first to knock him out, that's saying something, because Oscar Valdez couldn't knock him out. Shakur Stevenson couldn't knock him out. If Emmanuel can, at only his 3rd fight this weight, that really is making a statement, and we'll see if he makes it.
So where does Tevin Farmer fit into this picture?
He doesn't. He doesn't fit into this picture. I saw Emmanuel Navarrete express some interest very recently in unifying titles with Joe Cordina. Given how human Joe looked in his last fight, I don't think Emmanuel's going to get him in the ring. I think Joe, he's likely going to defend his title against Lee Wood on the Matchroom side of things at some point next year. That's saying that I don't think Emmanuel Navarrete is going to have much luck getting the other champions at this weight to share the ring with him. Promotional politics and the risks versus rewards factor. So when you look at a guy like Tevin, what you ask yourself is, what does Emmanuel Navarrete get out of fighting him?
I'm not against the fight. I actually like the fight, the idea of it. But if you're Team Navarrete, you're going to look at that fight and you're going to ask yourself, what do we get out of voluntarily defending our title against him? It's not a big money fight.
He's not a top-ranked fighter. He's not on our side of things. I think the reason that Emmanuel Navarrete is boxing on the undercard of a show that Shakur Stevenson is headlining is because the people at Top Rank are laying the foundations, the groundwork, for what could be a Stevenson versus Navarrete fight next year.
They're not boxing on the same show by accident. It's by design.
In reference to fighting on the same show as Shakur Stevenson, Emmanuel said, I plan to use this opportunity to put on a great performance. And as stated, I don't think he ended up there by accident. It's by design. They're laying the foundations for what could be a fight between them. I don't know what expectations are outside of this show. Navarrete insisted to BoxingScene.com. I'd like to believe that they placed us on the same show for a reason, but I don't waste too much time thinking about it. I just plan to use this opportunity to put on a great performance.
Emmanuel is never in a boring fight, whether he looks good, looks great, or looks bang average, looks less than spectacular. One thing that's consistent with Emmanuel's fights is that they're action-packed and entertaining. So that might have something to do with why they put him on the undercard.
Though I don't think the decision to put him on the undercard is exclusive to his entertainment value, the aesthetic of his fights. A fight between Emmanuel Navarrete and Shakur Stevenson, it has been talked about, the subject has been broached before, and I feel the reason they're putting these guys on the same show is because they're laying the groundwork for that fight next year. Emmanuel broached the subject himself, saying, I would love to fight Shakur Stevenson one day, but my main focus before then is to unify the titles, noted Navarrete, who won the WBO 130-pound title earlier this year in a 9th-round knockout of Liam Wilson. I've never had the chance to unify at junior featherweight or featherweight, so I would love the chance to do that at this weight before I move up.
You tell yourself, well, that settles it. Emmanuel wants to unify with one or some of the other champions at the weight. He's not about to move up, though what you have to consider is, where are the other champions? Where are the other alphabet titles? Hector Luis Garcia of the Dominican Republic, he's got the WBA.
He's on the PBC side of things, and he's about to defend his WBA title against Lamont Roach. Joe Cordina, he's got the IBF title. He's over there on the Matchroom side of things, and he just defended his title a week or a little over a week ago. Didn't look too good doing it. And lastly is the WBC champion, free agent O'Shaquie Foster, who just successfully defended his WBC title for the first time a little over a week ago, also on the Matchroom side of things, with the difference being that he himself is not a Matchroom fighter.
But that could change.
If those fights can't happen against the other champions at 130, then of course we would want to look into a big fight with Shakur, admitted Navarrete. I would love the chance to become a 4-division world champion if he wins versus De Los Santos, but for now, my goal is to unify the 130-pound division. You say to yourself that the guy just got there earlier this year. He basically just arrived at 130 pounds. This fight that he's about to have on Thursday against Robson Conceicao, it's only his 3rd fight at the weight. So who says that he can't explore those other unification matches? And I reiterate, the problem is the belts are on other sides of the street. Even if Emmanuel really wants to fight those guys, how many of those guys want to fight Emmanuel. I would favor him to beat them all. Hector Luis Garcia, Joe Cordina, and even Oshaki Foster, who had a Fight of the Year candidate with Rocky Hernandez, acquitted himself very well and took it out of the judge's hands. He stopped the guy when he needed to stop the guy. But even with that, I would favor Emmanuel to beat them all.
Even if Emmanuel wants to fight those guys, how many of those guys want to fight Emmanuel? What does the fight pay? Who's going to cross over to whose side of the street, because somebody has to?
WBA champion Hector Luis Garcia, while he is still WBA champion, he's a PBC fighter. That's where he fights.
Joe Cordina, IBF champion, he's with Matchroom, and it's looking more and more like he's going to have a voluntary title defense next year against Lee Wood, which is a big money fight for the both of them across the pond.
If you Joe Cordina, what the hell are you gonna roll the dice with a hard puncher, a wrecking machine like Emmanuel Navarrete, when you can catch Lee Wood on his way up? A naturally smaller fighter moving up in weight that can get you a nice size price, a nice size payday. Cordina versus Navarrete doesn't seem likely to me.
Now, Foster versus Navarrete, that's a little bit more feasible because Oshaki Foster, he is a free agent. So if the Navarrete people were to make him an offer,
it then becomes a question of how much would they have to offer him? How much would it take to get Oshaki Foster in the ring with Emmanuel Navarrete? And even with that, therein lies a dilemma. Top Rank's not about to break the bank just to get Oshaki in there when they can spend that money on a Navarrete versus Stevenson fight. Two of their own guys, their own fighters. So as much as Emmanuel might want to stick around at 130 and unify that division,
he may have his plans and Top Rank may have theirs, but he needs Top Rank's money to make these fights happen, and I don't think Top Rank is going to break the bank for a fighter they don't have under contract. They don't have Oshaki under contract. Maybe that could change.
And maybe the cucumbers taste better pickled. Maybe the reason Emmanuel is boxing on the same show as Shakur Stevenson is because that's what their plan is. That's what they plan on doing. That's what they're going to use their money for. Use it for that fight at some point next year.
And I told you, this is not the first time the subject of a Stevenson versus Navarrete fight was broached. We've been hearing about that all year in spots. I would actually like to see Emmanuel spend a little bit more time at 130. See about unifying titles with some of these other champions, even if it means he has to cross the street. I like his chances.
But these managers and these promoters, they're not fucking dumb. Who's gonna pay Emmanuel to cross the street, come over to their side of things, beat up their champion, take their belt, then leave?
I don't think he's gonna get to unify.
It's funny. It would suck. I would hate to just have boxing skills and not be able to like defend myself on the ground or something. Because then I feel like I couldn't talk shit. Because like the boxers can't actually talk shit to me. You know what I mean? They can, but it's like you can't do anything about it. You know what I mean?
They could say in our world,
I could fight all three of them in an MMA fight, not at the same time.
Right.
But I could beat them all in one night in an MMA fight.
Right.
Like that's embarrassing. No, it's not embarrassing. I take that. It's not embarrassing. But they can't. Like, they can talk shit on Twitter, but they can't actually fight. They can box like motherfuckers.
Right.
And I'm not even saying I'm going to go out there. I believe I could beat them? Yes. Am I a little delusional? That's how I got here.
Sure.
And, but yeah, that would suck.
What sucks is Sean O'Malley's effort to hide what can only be described as penis envy. Another MMA fighter saying this and that about the sport of boxing and what he'd do to boxers in the octagon while talking about boxing in the boxing ring. What MMA fighters like to describe as quote-unquote real fighting as opposed to boxing.
How MMA fighters like to sometimes excuse themselves for not being able to make it as boxers in order to make what boxers make, because boxers make substantially more than MMA fighters do.
The aforementioned fighters that Sean O'Malley himself mentioned, Shakur Stevenson, Devin Haney, Gervonta Davis, every single one of these guys make many times more, many times over what Sean O'Malley makes in the octagon. And let's just cut the fucking crap. That's the only reason he's talking about these guys, because he would like to make what they make, but he can't make it as a boxer.
If he could, then he would. You're not rolling around in the octagon and doing roundhouses and karate kicks because of how capable you are as a boxer. If you were a capable boxer, then you would box and make more than you're making now.
A lot of MMA fighters like to describe their style of fighting as quote-unquote real fighting and closer to street fighting when statistics show that boxing is actually the much more dangerous sport than MMA is. What you see in MMA is mostly superficial cuts that look more gruesome than they actually are, whereas boxing...
There's a greater probability of concussions, long-term brain damage, and or death associated with boxing than mixed martial arts. So let's can the pissing contest, shall we?
Your sport, your discipline, is neither more dangerous or more lucrative. It's none of those things, and the only reason you're sitting here talking about these young guys, these young boxers that you claim you could beat in one night in the octagon...
They could literally say the same thing about you and anybody like you in a boxing ring. That they could beat 3, 4, 5 guys like you in the same night in a boxing ring because you don't know how to box. You're not a boxer.
Seeing Francis Ngannou perform as well as he did against Tyson Fury likely put a battery in Sean O'Malley's back, and now he thinks that he can try his hand at boxing and do anything other than lose.
The age-old argument that mixed martial arts is closer to street fighting than boxing is when I don't see a lot of arm bars in street fights or rear naked chokes. I see more right crosses and more straight punches. I see more punching associated with a street fight than any of that stuff you see in the octagon.
What MMA fighters like to say to make themselves feel better because they can't make it as boxers is that their discipline is more effective in a street fight when a street fight is a wild card. Anything could happen in a street fight. You're assuming that the street fight is a fair fight where the guy don't take out a knife or a weapon of some kind and beats you with it.
Stabs you or shoots you with it.
You would sooner in a street fight with a well-placed punch, a well-placed right cross, rather than a roundhouse or a spinning back kick or any of that kung fu-y stuff you see in the octagon. Those things are highly impractical in a real-life setting.
Those maneuvers, you're gonna take a fight to the ground in a street fight where you may get stomped out by the other guy's buddies?
Enough with the in a street fight scenario. The reality of it is, Sean O'Malley is just shading boxing because as much as he would like to make what boxers make, he can't make it as a boxer, because if he could, he would.
He's a 6-figure fighter with penis envy for 7-figure fighters what are 7-figure fighters.
Sift through the smoke screen. That's what this is.